Warning, this video contains spoilers for the following. You have been warned. What is evil? This question has perplexed thinkers worldwide and has resulted in many definitions. Everyone has a different opinion about what evil is and what makes someone evil. Welcome back to Shade Cinema. My name is Chris, and today I will make sense of it all and come up with a concrete foundation as to what evil is and, more specifically, what drives people to do evil things. Let's start simple. What is the definition of evil? According to dictionary.com, evil means someone or an act that is morally wrong or bad, which is a simple definition. But evil people or actions aren't so simple in reality, and much like its definition, evil is generally subjective and based on the individual or the society. Something that I might consider evil, you might not consider evil. Many people think that evil is when a person does a bad thing, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Much like many of the villains that will be analyzed in this video, this topic is much more complex than it seems. That's why I've developed a Venn diagram specifically designed to specify the types of villains in a story. This diagram consists of 3 circles. To fit into one of the circles, one must possess at least 2 of the 4 qualities listed. FYI, I didn't come up with these terms. I've seen these terms appear on my shorts feed before and thought it was an interesting way to categorize villains. All I'm doing is expanding on the idea. I'm only taking credit for the diagram, not the terms used for these 3 circles. Anyway, let's begin. The first one is evil. This means that a villain is doing bad things purely due to their evil nature. Now you might be thinking, Chris, you
young sexy motherfucker.
Why would you put evil as its own category? Well, it's because this isn't a Venn diagram that determines how evil someone is, but one that looks at what type of villain a character is, and part of the diagram determines whether or not a character is evil. Anyway, let's start. The qualities that make someone fall into the evil category consist of malevolence, which is the desire to bring about negative consequences upon others driven by ill will and spite. Next up is the enjoyment of morally reprehensible actions. So not just simply murder, but the enjoyment of murdering, for example. Up next is deception and manipulation. Basically when someone manipulates and deceives others for their gain or to harm others. Finally, we have lack of compassion and empathy for others, which is when someone doesn't feel, understand, or care about others and how they feel about situations and actions, particularly when the villain is committing them. Someone that fits in here perfectly would be the Emperor from Star Wars. He has no compassion for others and has been on a murderous rampage since he was young. He manipulated a whole galaxy to make him an emperor and did it all with a smile. Needless to say, he's the archetype of a purely evil villain. The second circle is broken. Broken includes villains that do bad things, partly or mainly due to a screwed up past. The qualities that make up a broken villain include trauma, basically when horrible things have happened to someone, primarily physical, but also emotional. Loss, which is when someone loses a loved one or something precious to them, like a home. Mental health challenges, which consists of depression, PTSD, and other negatively affecting mental health disorders. And lastly, personal failures, which is when someone experiences a significant failure that causes them to fall into a broken mindset. A series of failures can also cause this quality. The character that goes in here is Anakin Skywalker from Attack of the Clones. Now I know at this point he's not a villain, but this was a significant turning point in his life, and it set a precedent for future calamities in Anakin's story, so it deserves a mention. Anakin's loss of his mother, and the fact that he couldn't save her, causes him to lash out against the Tuskens. The slaughter that happens is because of a traumatic experience, rather than because of any malevolent intent. A spur-of-the-moment type of thing. He felt horrible about it afterward too. This highlights another key element of a broken character, which is revenge. Revenge is an act found in the broken category because revenge requires some bad act to be done upon you, often involving the qualities found in the broken category. There are often instances of revenge being an evil act. Still, when the culprit is under immense emotional distress, it can cause them to act out seemingly malevolent actions without thinking rationally during the whole ordeal. So Anakin was not evil at that point, it's just that he committed a terrible crime in the heat of the moment. And finally, the third circle is influenced. Influenced houses the villains that do bad things because others or outside forces influence them to do their evil deeds. The qualities include coercion, which is when someone is forced to do something, or else the culprit will do something horrible to the victim, such as hurt the victim's family or reveal some sort of secret about the person doing the deed. This quality includes blackmail. The second trait is victim of manipulation, which often comes as propaganda or indoctrination. It can also come from victims being enticed to do certain things for others that may or may not be in their best interest. Next up is compensation, which is when someone is convinced of doing something wrong because they will be rewarded for it. This would include promotions into higher ranks, bribes, payments, or inclusions into exclusive groups. And lastly, we have peer pressure, which is the desire for someone to fit in and be accepted into a group by doing things that go against their moral compass. Gollum, or Smeagol, from Lord of the Rings, is an example of a purely influenced villain. The ring of power that Gollum has prolonged his life, but it was his only source of happiness, and he does terrible things only to protect and keep his ring. The ring compels Gollum to do things for its own benefit. Despite the three listed here, most villains are in between at least two of the three circles. Here are 4 more villains in this diagram and the categories they belong in. The cluster bomb. This is the section between broken and evil. A character in this section is usually someone who has such a screwed up past that they resort to evil. It's often in the pursuit of justice, but said justice often involves the deaths of many, and the character also often lacks compassion. The ends justify the means type of deal. The character in this section is the Arkham Knight from Batman Arkham Knight. Let's look at the qualities he has in each circle. In the game, he manipulates and convinces a large militia group to take over Gotham, and he deceives Batman by pretending to be someone he isn't in order to kill him. By using Batman's tactics against him, which makes sense since he's Jason Todd, a former Robin. But it's not just that though. He's definitely malevolent. He intends to destroy all of Gotham to get his revenge on Batman. And as I said before, revenge is an easy path to evil, but it often requires a broken foundation, which is prevalent with the Arkham Knight. Before the Arkham Knight, there was Jason Todd, the original Robin that Batman trained. The Joker kidnapped and tortured him for many years. Batman thought the Joker had killed Jason, so he stopped looking for him. Jason felt abandoned by Batman, so his traumatic experience and mental health problems, caused by feelings of abandonment by his surrogate father, caused him to have a mental breakdown and go from a loving person to a hateful one. Revenge was the only thing on his mind, and he didn't care who he had to kill to get Batman's head. That's why he's a cluster bomb. In an attempt to destroy his target, Jason kills anyone else around the Bat in an almost indiscriminate fashion. He's not afraid to take the lives of others in his pursuit of vengeance. Let's move on to our next section, the guided missile. This is the section between broken and influenced. A character in this section is someone who is often manipulated by another villain to commit evil acts they don't want to commit but are coerced to committing such acts due to mental health issues as well as outside factors like money and other forms of compensation. Someone in this category isn't necessarily evil, but they can become evil if they don't change their ways fast enough or if they get corrupted by the power they attain. A perfect example of this would be Anakin Skywalker from Episode 3, specifically during the Jedi Purge. Let's look at his qualities in each circle and see where he fits. I covered most of this section previously, but I want to add a couple things. Because Anakin gets visions of Padme dying, he begins to fear that he will lose her, just like he lost his mother. Out of desperation and out of fear of failing his goal of saving his wife, alongside his trauma from losing his mother, he turns to Palpatine, who takes full advantage of Anakin's dilemma. Palpatine manipulates the Force so that Anakin has those dreams about Padme and makes him believe that if Anakin turns to the dark side, he can save Padme. At his current strength, Anakin lacks the power to save his wife. Palpatine not only promises to teach Anakin how to cheat death, but promises him a greater yield of power if Anakin does his part in slaughtering the Jedi, which Anakin doesn't enjoy doing initially. It grows on him eventually because, much like the dark side, committing acts of evil creates a rush and a sense of superiority and power over others. But initially, Anakin wasn't evil, just a desperate man who was twisted and manipulated by an ambitious man who sought to conquer a whole galaxy. He was Palpatine's guided missile, used by His Excellency to destroy his enemies. The Incendiary Bomb. This is the section that mixes influenced and evil. A character in this section has evil tendencies, but they're often either inspired by someone to commit other immoral acts or are forced to do so. They're usually subordinates of other villains and often have a milder evil temperament in comparison to the main villain of the story. A villain that fits in this section is the Deep from The Boys. Let's look at both sections and see where he fits. The Deep is someone whose entire existence and life depends on his status of being in the Seven. Without the Seven, the Deep is nothing. Therefore, he will do whatever it takes to be a member of the group. He often does morally reprehensible things for Homelander because he's afraid of getting punished by Homelander, and because Homelander keeps dangling the possibility that Deep may be reinstated into the Seven. That motivates the Deep into working for Homelander and committing evil acts for him, such as when he kills the vice presidential candidate so that an ally of Homelander can take the VP position. He's not just influenced though. The Deep has done some heinous things throughout his life, out of his own volition. He did commit SA on Starlight on her first day on the job, telling her that he's the number 2 guy in the Seven, and that if she refuses his advances, she would be removed from the group. He was eventually exposed, and although he was kicked out of the Seven, and was sorry for what he did supposedly, when he went to Herogasm in Season 3, and the twins saw him, one of them said that the whole Starlight drama was a bit overreacted, and he said,
I know, right?
This shows that the man had no remorse over what he did, and probably secretly enjoyed it. It's the entitled nature of the Supes that make them do such horrible things, and I think the Deep is greatly influenced by the people around him, especially Homelander. He sees that Homelander does terrible things, so he also feels justified in doing them. That influence spreads like wildfire, which is why he's an incendiary bomb. All that person needs is a match to get lit off, and that can sow a lot of chaos. That fire spreads around to a lot of people. You see this kind of thing in soldiers, who will do horrible things for their venerated leaders, and that kind of evil is challenging to stop. The nuclear warhead. Finally, the last section mixes all 3 circles, evil, broken, and influenced. This is the ultimate villain. Someone with all 3 traits is not only evil, but also has a traumatized past that compels them to make those bad choices, and their actions are sparked by some outside force, usually an authority or idyllic figure they look up to. It often results in total destruction. And when I thought about this category, one name came to mind instantly, that being Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan when he starts the rumbling. Now initially, Eren was not an evil character. He was very traumatized from witnessing his mother being eaten by a Titan, and vowed revenge against the Titans. But he didn't seem evil at that point, more driven to wipe out the monsters that terrorized his nation. He began his turn when he learned the truth about why the Titans exist. He learned from his father that he and the Titans were Eldians, and were targeted and discriminated against by the Marleyans, who sent all of the Titans to Eren's homeland. When Eren learned about this, alongside the memories and manipulations of his father, his hatred shifted from the Titans to the Marleyans and the rest of the world, which sparked his idea for the rumbling, which was a plan to wipe out the world and start a new world with only Eldians being left alive. His reward for starting and completing the rumbling would mean that he and the Eldians would live in peace and be free to live however they see fit. It's that kind of rationalization that drives Eren's evil forward. It's in the mission statement of the rumbling that Eren fully intends to wipe out the rest of the world. He fully intends to kill everyone outside of his homeland for whom he holds a deep hatred. I would be hard-pressed to say that Eren enjoys this process, but he definitely doesn't feel any compassion for the world he's about to destroy. Sure, he cried to that one kid before his attack on the barrio, but he didn't choose to change course and call off the attack after that encounter. He wouldn't have been able to enact his plans without a couple followers. Eren didn't necessarily lie to his followers about the fact that the world wanted all Eldians to die, but he convinced them that a planet-wide genocide was the only solution to that problem. Still, his minions carried out his will and tried to make Eren's dream of a utopia for Eldians a reality. This is why the nuclear warhead is so dangerous, because not only are they willing to commit evil, but they feel as though they are justified in committing it due to their past trauma. And with that trauma, they can be influenced by the dogmatic views of others, which causes them to lash out against the world. And sometimes, the warhead can attract followers who think similarly, which feeds into the justification that the warhead has for their actions. They're not just villains, they are leaders of whole movements, which makes Eren a more significant threat than most other villains who are often limited within their own immediate power. So that's the villain's Venn diagram. I hope all of this makes sense to you guys. This will be the basis of a new series on the channel that will analyze villains and classify them wherever they fit in the diagram. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos based on this Venn diagram and other video essays and podcasts. Comment down below your thoughts, opinions, and whatever questions you have. I do reply to every comment. If you would also like to see a show on Walter White and whether or not he's evil, click the link on the left side of the screen.